right. Hello, friends. Welcome back to Amplifying Authenticity, the podcast where we explore what it means to live and lead with truth, courage, and heart. I'm your host, Megan Fucciarelli, speaker, author, and leadership coach. And every week we dig into real conversations about authenticity as both a personal journey and a professional practice. Today's guest is someone who truly embodies that intersection. Jonathan Hart is the owner and design director of Bigmouth Creative, a human-centric branding agency that helps mission-driven organizations tell their stories with heart and integrity. After years working in major Chicago agencies, he decided to build something different, something that values purpose over pretense and people over profit. He's now leading Bigmouth Creative with a B Corp certification that we'll get into a little bit more later, proving that business can be both creative and conscientious, all while being profitable. Today, we're talking about authenticity, not just as a buzzword, but as a business strategy and a leadership practice. Jonathan, welcome to Amplifying Authenticity. I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you. I'm so glad and honored to be here as well. I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Absolutely. So you are all about leading with a story, right? Leading with a heart, being human centric. Tell us a little bit more about your story that brought you to Big Mouth Creative.
Yeah. So I come from a graphic design background. That is my training and what brought me to this industry. I moved to Chicago in '08. I bounced around at a bunch of big agencies here, where I kind of learned pretty quickly that the big agency life, first of all, is designed specifically to burn young creatives out, right? So putting that profit over people, certainly front and center. But second of all, that it is an older industry dominated by older cisgender white men who have little time and space for members of the LGBT community, women, minorities, et cetera, et cetera. So I always knew kind of after those experiences that I wanted to start something different, something that was a safe and brave space for people of all backgrounds and lived experiences, but also a place where creativity could thrive through authenticity, putting people first, really working towards a work-life balance that really gives people the time to rest and rejuvenate their creative spirit. So I started Big Mouth in 2018, and we've just been on a journey since then.
I love that. Thank you so much for sharing. Was there one particular moment that you remember saying, oh my gosh, I need to create something different? Or was it a combination of multiple moments?
I would say that it was probably a combination of multiple moments, but there is definitely one that sticks in my mind. I was at a smaller design firm here. It was one of the first places that I worked. We were purchased by a larger holding agency, and kind of there was a crossover period where they still hadn't figured out how they were merging all these agencies together. I was working on a brand refresh for a industrial company. I won't give any specific names, but we were on a conference call, back in the days when you used the phone and everybody was on speakerphone. But the team at the industrial company didn't know that I was on the line, and the CEO was kind of lambasting the work that I had done. It was a bunch of logos, and said that all of the logos were too feminine, and that everything that he was seeing, he wasn't sure who it came from on the team, but it was too feminine. It wasn't right for them. And I remember my creative director putting the phone on mute and turning to me and saying, do not take any of this to heart. Like, we'll have a conversation about this after this call. Like, right now, we're going to let the client speak, but I promise I've got your back. And he did. So this is a story that ends well, right? But it was also a moment where I sat there thinking, why are we working with clients like this? Why are these the types of conversations that we're having? Because I know, I'm coming from a pretty privileged background as a cisgender man myself. But at the same time, like I know there are other designers who might have gone through similar experiences where maybe they didn't have that privilege to rely on, or they didn't have that emotional intelligence to kind of take a step back and know that this wasn't something that was their fault, that this was
Yeah.
something coming from somebody who had problems on their own.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that. And as you're sharing that, I'm thinking about how many spaces don't exist for people from marginalized backgrounds, right? And how we need to be more mindful of creating those spaces. And I really honor and respect you for not only thinking that it's needed, but then creating that. So, can you tell us what your thought process was as you worked through creating Bigmouth Creative? What was that like for you?
Yeah, that's a deep question, and it's one that's been constantly evolving. And at a certain point, a few years ago, I had to kind of embrace that fact that we would never reach a destination. That in many ways, that was about the journey and listening to my team and kind of evolving what things look like uh, constantly and kind of taking that feedback. The original iteration of Big Mouth was something that was a little bit more expansive than it is now. In many ways, it was about building this network of creatives who maybe were consultants, who maybe had small businesses of their own. And so Big Mouth was sort of trying to be this central hub for supporting creativity and authenticity and bringing our full selves to work kind of across that network of people. Of course, 2020 changed a lot of how we approach business, about how we approach creating safe and brave spaces, right? When we're working from home or working remotely, and relationships uh, look very different now than they did in 2019. So a lot of that has really been kind of figuring out within our own ecosystem, how do we support each other, how do we utilize emotional intelligence and how we work together, how our processes look. We have a very expansive employee handbook that covers a lot of details, including how we handle disagreements, how we work together remotely, how we sort of protect work-life balance for each other. So, for example, one of the things that we learned early on in the pandemic was we put team availability in our email signatures so that clients can see that maybe some of our employees are not available a standard 9 to 5 because we highly value the idea that creativity is not something that can be boxed in by 9 to 5. So we kind of had to learn all of those things on the fly. And so we built a lot of that in 2020, 2021. And then, like I mentioned, a lot of that has just been kind of evolving over time, listening to my team, what feedback they have about policies that we've built that we can shift. Since we've become B Corp certified, we've taken on some of the policies that B Corp espouses. Yeah. Does that answer that question? I know
It
there were a lot
does.
in there.
No, that's great. And I love that you started talking about B Corp because when I really think about what you stand for, right? Being human-centric, putting people over profit, a lot of that resonates with B Corp certification, which I know you are fully certified. We're in the process of getting certified right now. It is an extensive feat. There's a lot of stuff there, and there's a lot of value with the pieces that they're asking for. How did you make the decision to say, I'm going to move forward with this really difficult, really time consuming certification? What made it say this is something that really matches with who we are at Big Mouth?
Yeah, so there was a moment in time where I went to, there's a local agency here in Chicago, a creative agency that is also B Corp certified. They had a series of talks, I believe it was in 2019, though don't quote me on that, where they would bring in clients from different industries and kind of workshop problem solving. It was a really cool event. But at the start of that workshop, they talked about being B Corp certified. And I remember sitting there thinking, wow, this is the first time that I've really experienced a network of people and ideas that are an intersection of all of my identities. They are an intersection of all of the values that I bring to entrepreneurship, to what I'm trying to build with Bigmouth. And so that moment was really the one that set us on that journey. It took many years after that for us to get B Corp certified. But I think that did sort of two things. One, it kind of set us up to start thinking about those policies and procedures that we needed to put in place as a business to be qualified for certification. But it also maybe in some ways reinforced those values along the way.
Mm-hmm.
Things that were always there for me personally, but also for my team. We're all eco-minded. We're all sort of social stewards in our own right. We're all very community focused, and we all value transparency and communication. So all of those values that we already kind of intrinsically had, that sort of early experience with B Corp just kind of helped reinforce those along the way.
Yeah. So would I be pushing the limit here to say that the B Corp certification felt authentic to you because it was something you believed in? It was just a certification to kind of showcase to the world what you believed in?
Yeah. I've never really looked at it as sort of a marketing stamp, or necessarily like a stamp of approval that we've made it in some shape or form. I've always looked at it as here's this thing that we want to be a part of. We know this is what we value. We want to be part of this larger movement. We want to be part of this community of people who believe that business can be a force for good. And I know there are many things that are going to come out of that. There are going to be connections. There's going to be potential clients that look at that certification as, that stamp of approval. There's going to be resources and education that we'll get out of it. But for me, it was more about a milestone on a larger trek for us.
Yeah. And I can relate to that 100%. Where we originally met was at NGLCC's conference, right? And I remember being there. Before I went, I was on the fence of whether I was going to go or not because it is not a cheap conference, right? And I remember saying, man, this has been a little bit of a tough year. Do I want to invest in that right now? And I had the honor of being able to speak at the conference. So I thought, okay, I'm going to do this. Like, I've not been before, I'm going to go. And within the first 2 hours of being surrounded by such amazing people, I said, oh, yes, this is where I need to be. It's being surrounded by people that get us, that we can be our authentic selves around. And I chose at that point because I was also trying to decide at that point whether I was going to move forward with B Corp certification. And I decided, I said, you know what? I want to be in spaces, more spaces like this, where I feel like I'm surrounded by people who are similar to me in mindset and values and authenticity. That was kind of that deciding point. And then when you shared that you were certified, I was like, okay, that's it. That's it. We're doing it. Right. And I think there's just so much to be said about surrounding yourself with people who just get you, where you don't have to explain yourself. You don't have to put on an air of who you are or what you are. You can just be. And that's really what the definition of authenticity is the ability to just be. It's not exposing too much. It's not trauma dumping. It's not any of those things. It's simply being in the moment, right?
Yeah.
And I'm wondering, as you have gone through different roles and you've done so much out in the world, how has authenticity helped you become the person you are today?
Yeah. Wow, I could probably talk for hours about that question in particular. But first, I want to say thank goodness that you did come to the MGLCC conference. not only because your talk was amazing, and I loved meeting you, but it was also a little bit of a moment for me, where it's also been a little bit of a tough year for us, and I remember thinking the same thing. Do I want to go? Is this the right thing for me in this moment in time? And we just had such authentic conversations, you and me in particular, and a few of the other business owners who were there that I spoke with, that really reinforced that it's okay to go through tough times. We all go through tough times. There's no shame in it. And I think that that's the way that I want to answer this question in particular, is that, when I started Bigmouth in 2018, obviously the world looked very different than it does now. And so those things that I valued, that path that I wanted the business to be on, was, this idea of putting people over profit. I used to say an agency that works for its people, not the other way around. So all of those things kind of are what drove the business forward. But as we've gone through such a tumultuous 5 years, right? It's been some of the highest highs and the lowest lows of my career in the last 5 years. One of the things that I have held on to the most, that has driven me the hardest to lean into my authentic self, lean into what I believe in, lean into DEI, even as it's under attack, is that shame is what drives us back into the shadows, right? And this year, I thought I was already ahead of that, I had dealt with all of the shame that I had ever kind of experienced in my life, both as a gay man, as, other aspects of my identity. And then, you get quickly hit with the shame of, oh gosh, it's, been a terrible year. I might have to let go of some people. Does that mean I'm a bad business owner? Does that mean I've made terrible choices? And I've learned, first of all, nobody is perfect. No business owner, no leader. Maybe people are in a better place than you might be, but guess what? They've gotten there through failures and through learning from those failures. So we really have to embrace failure as an iterative process towards innovation, towards being our better selves. And the number one way I think that we do that is letting go of that shame through being vulnerable with others who can protect that vulnerability in us. So that's one of the things that I really loved about those conversations I had with you at NGLCC, and it's one of the things that I love the most about the B Corp community. Is it's such an intersection of all of those identities for me, of being a proud and out member of the LGBT community, being an entrepreneur, being somebody who cares about the environment, who cares about transparency and fiscal responsibility, taking care of our communities, is I can go into those spaces and let all of those walls down. I don't have to pretend to be anything in particular in those spaces. And when I come out of those spaces, I feel incredibly equipped to tackle any shame that I might be feeling in any of those individual identities.
Yeah, I love that. And our first core principle at Us Squared is that shame, blame, and guilt are the glue that hold prejudice and stigma in place.
Yeah.
Right. And as business owners, you said it right there, that oftentimes we are told as business owners that if we have to lay off a employee, or if we have a decreasing revenue, that we're failures, or that we're not a good business owner, or we're not a good leader. And the facts are, every business that is thriving right now at some point saw a dip. And a good leader doesn't make that decision happen to them. They make the things happen that need to happen to be able to continue doing what needs to move on. And I know for myself, I had to furlough quite a few employees throughout this year. And instead of saying, oh my gosh, this was a failure, I said, but I'm able to keep the message going. And all of the employees that I had to let go knew that it was nothing personal. I made sure that they had health insurance for a period of time after working with me. I made sure that they had whatever supports they could have to help them find the next position. And most of them actually still work with us on a part-time basis as they can. And I think that speaks to the power of the work more than it speaks to me as a leader, it means that I had a really good team who believed in the mission of the organization. And that's what we want, right? We want people on our team who can authentically say that they agree with what we're doing. I know one of the big things or one of the main components of what you do at Bigmouth Creative is some marketing support, correct?
Yes,
So, what I hear a lot right now is that storytelling is one of the most powerful versions of marketing. Would you agree with that statement?
absolutely. And we're in such a unique moment in time where we're almost forgetting that fact, right? Business is being driven right now by data and AI and all of these things that are inherently not human. And I think we'd all be in a much better place if we remembered that we're all just humans. We're all talking to humans. The work we're doing is human. Yeah.
So, what makes this story? Because as you shared, everyone's using, or 99% of the population are using AI, right? And we're having AI write our stories for us instead of remembering that we own our own stories.
Yeah.
What advice would you give to listeners to help them come back to that center, still honoring that AI is a very helpful tool from time to time? But how can we honor the human element and make sure that the stories we're telling are still authentically our stories?
Yeah. Well, I think you hit the nail on the head with your question that AI is just a tool. And no matter what anybody tells you, it is nothing more than that, at least right now. So looking at it under that lens, I think is what is important. It is a tool that can help you refine things. It is a tool that can help you do things more efficiently. But it is just a tool. So I think what's really important is uh, taking that time to understand what are those pieces of information about yourself. What are the things that, like, when you dig deep, when you really value and hold space for yourself, those things that are inherently you. And sure, you can start to feed those ideas into AI and craft your narrative in a way that maybe you aren't personally equipped to do. Though I personally think getting support from somebody who's been trained to do that these days is a little bit better than doing that through AI. But I know not everybody has the resources to do that. Uh,
Mhm.
we often say that the hardest thing to do is to hold a mirror to yourself, and that's what we're here to do. So that's my personal plug for using marketing. But there are lots of different ways to kind of look at lots of different tools and ways to look at what your values are. Really kind of digging deep into who your authentic self is.
Yeah. I love that idea that the hardest thing to do is to hold the mirror up to yourself. And that's what your role is at Big Mouth Creative as marketing, is to hold that mirror for your clients, right? So
Yeah,
powerful.
and I would say too, I know that that is true because it's hard for us to do for ourselves.
Right.
Whenever we're approaching something, like we're kind of going through our own website revision process right now, and it's a struggle to do it sometimes for ourselves as well. So we oftentimes reach out to others who are external to our own organization to say, hey, these are the things that we're seeing from an outside point of view. Do you see sort of the same things in how we talk about ourselves and the things that we do and the ways that we present ourselves?
Right. So, if someone listening today wanted to be able to share their story more authentically from a marketing standpoint, what is one thing that they can do tomorrow to start that?
Oh, that's a good question. Um, yeah, I may need a second to think about that. We certainly have processes that we use, particularly in our workshops, where we use word association or different things that we do to kind of dig deep below the surface. Because we oftentimes have clients who come to us who think that they know who they are, and then once we kind of get them talking in a workshop, we realize, okay, there's actually a layer or two deeper than that.
Yeah.
So I guess maybe one of the things that I would say is don't try and do that necessarily on your own. Maybe have a conversation with somebody that you trust, somebody who knows you pretty well, and start to try and dig at some of these things that make you who you are, some of the things that guide how you make decisions, guide how you act, things that you might think are intrinsic to your personality, and kind of talk those over with somebody that you trust. Because I think, that's the thing that's so valuable in our workshops is our clients are talking to us and we know how to ask those questions that dig a little bit deeper. And so, we have that space through our techniques and through our different tactics and different types of questions that we ask to dig to that. But it's something, the client wouldn't have been able to get to on their own. So maybe, talking through that similarly with somebody that you trust might help kind of reflect those questions back on you that help you dig below the surface.
Love that. And we're going to give information on how people can reach out to you and your team directly in a little bit here as well. So thank you for sharing that, Jonathan.
Yeah.
Speaking to the B Corp certification, I'm wondering if you have a step or something that people could consider to help their business become more purpose-driven.
Yeah. So when we started the process, the first thing that we did was look at the B Corp certification assessment, all the different questions that it asks, and kind of took a preliminary step back to say, what are the things here that we already feel comfortable with? And what are the things that maybe we feel like we could work on in the short term to be better qualified to be certified? And then what are the things that are long-term stretch goals? And so the things that were in that first category, we just made sure that they were kind of refined, in place, ready to go. The things that were in that second category, we decided what are the ones that we think we could quickly execute on before certification? What are the things that we can work on that sort of post-certification we can feel good about, that can be part of our annual impact reports, that can be things that we can kind of continuously work on? And then what are the things that are stretch goals that we just want to put sort of in the back of our minds as we grow the business over time, that maybe, the second time we get recertified, we might be in a good place for. So that was kind of the first thing that helped us really get organized against those things. I think also having conversations with your team is really helpful. I don't think that getting B Corp certified is a smart thing to do on your own as a leader, right? It's really important to get your team involved, not just so that they know this is something that we're doing, this is something that we're working for, but they might have ideas on how to improve your candidacy. They might have things that they're really passionate about that they want to help with. So that was one of the second things that we did when we started that process, was had kind of a all team call where we talked about the process, talked about getting certified, and allowed people to raise their hands about things that they wanted to participate in. So we had 2 additional team members who were kind of part of that certification process, who jumped into the assessment tool and kind of helped with those different classifications that I just mentioned. From there, it was all about just kind of working through that step by step. Those team members and we had biweekly conversations about progress along that path. We started in April of last year. We submitted our certification paperwork in August, I believe, and we received the certification in March. So that kind of shows you how long the process is. The other thing, and I know you and I talked about this, is there are a lot of people out there who are ready and willing to help. If you have the resources for it, there are consultants who can jump in and kind of do some of that work for you. Because I know, especially for small businesses, it is a very difficult process and task to undertake. But there are also people in the community who are willing just to give advice, other businesses who are willing to talk about their process, how they tackled some of those things. So yeah, there's a plethora of resources, people to talk to. And there's probably no one good way to get started other than saying, yeah, this is right for us.
Yeah, and the assessment you speak of is actually available at no cost to anyone who wants it. So even if you're just a business owner, maybe you're not ready to get certified, but you just want to see where you would stand on that assessment, it's available on their website to be able to go through that assessment just to see where you would be. And I know myself, I did use a consultant to help me through that process because when we had to lay off quite a few of our team members, I could not add one more thing to any of our plates. And it was a lot of just organizing because we didn't do anything extra to get certified. We simply put everything in the places that it needed to be so that we could submit it. Because my obligation when I went into it was I love the ideas and the values that this stands for. And I want to take anything we're not doing as an opportunity to grow in the future. I don't want to do something specifically for the certification process. I want to submit what we have. And if it's enough to get certified, great. And if it's not, then we'll work towards getting enough to get certified. Right. And I know
Yeah.
we had that conversation of almost doing a lot of the pieces, knowing that you might not have needed all of them initially. And I think sometimes as business owners, I'll speak for myself, we want to be perfect, right? I want to be perfect. I want to be able to have every box checked off. I want to be able to say that I'm doing all the things. And what I realized a few years back is when I try to do all the things, I'm actually doing none of the things. And as you shared earlier, there is no perfect, right? And I think that was something that along the way, as I've leaned into my own authenticity, I've had to embrace that imperfection is wonderful and that all of us are perfectly imperfect, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The
Oh, go ahead, Jonathan.
I know. I was just going to say that's a good point too, because our verification officer in that last stage of the process said we were over prepared. So, we maybe could have received certification a little earlier than we did by not chasing some of. I don't know that we necessarily chase perfection in some of the areas, but you'll see when you go into that assessment tool for any of the listeners that there might be some things where you're pretty close to that point, or maybe you've got something, but it's not quite in the format that B Corp is asking for. And we had a lot of that when we started the process, those things that are like just a baby step away from being sort of right there for that certification point. So that's kind of why we took a little bit of time, was to get as many of those things over that finish line as we could. And we probably didn't need to do as much as we did. But I think for us as a newly certified organization that cared so deeply about so many of those different areas, it was kind of almost motivation to do some of
Absolutely. Absolutely. And we found that as well as we were going through, as I was working with the consultant and then meeting with my team of, okay, we need to get this together and we need to pull this. It was great confirmation and also some great new ideas of what else we could incorporate to align with the values that we knew we had.
Yeah.
Yeah, very powerful. So, Jonathan, before we close out, I ask every guest the same 3 questions. So, it's how we ground the series, it's how we connect all of our conversations together. So, with your permission, I'd like to ask you 3 final questions.
Absolutely.
All right. They're not the quick rapid fire that you hear on some podcasts, like, do you prefer cats or dogs? So I'm sorry if you're looking for that. It's not quite that. Um, a little bit more of an intrinsic depth here. But my first question for you is, when you think about the work you do and the life you lead, what is your why?
That's one I struggle with sometimes, because it's hard for me to think of one why, right? There are so many things that drive me in the work that I do: a passion for creativity, a passion for having a team that is excited to come to work every day, a passion for helping our clients do the work that they do, connecting with their audiences, a passion for bringing people to the B Corp community, a passion for standing up for causes I believe in. So yeah, I struggle for a why. I would say probably at the root of all of those is finding my own sense of joy in work and life. Because all of those things are the things that bring me joy. And maybe some of it too is the legacy that I leave behind. My husband and I have decided not to have kids. So we're not necessarily like leaving anything behind generationally ourselves, but I know that the work that I'm doing is in some way making our little corner of the world a better place. And for me, that is what's important for my legacy.
I love that. Leaving a legacy and also finding some joy.
Yeah.
What does it look like for you to amplify authenticity?
This is also one I've struggled with lately. Gosh, these questions. Uh, and I will say that I particularly struggled with this one a few weeks ago where I spoke at a diverse supplier summit where I was kind of pitching Bigmouth and was talking about human-centric marketing. And I think the reason why I struggle with it right now is because the work that we do, particularly in the DEI space lately, has been under such attack that every day it's hard not to question how much of that we need to not necessarily hide, but is that going to affect our business? How vocal we are about these things that we value, and you know when you go into those spaces, you're reminded that no, it is not going to affect your business. That there are people out there who are aligned and who believe in that, and who leaning into that does have a direct effect on their own lives and their own joy. So I would say that I think for me, that is what the reminder is these days, is those interactions, that community that I've built. When I lean into my own authenticity, when I am myself, it gives other people permission to be their own selves. And the more that we can all collectively do that, the more we can fight, these sort of powers that be that are putting that under attack right now.
Yeah. So you actually leaned into the next question. We know that storytelling is the best marketing, right? So I'm wondering if you could tell us a story about or an example of when you leaned into authenticity, as you just shared.
Sure. But before I answer that, I do want to say, to that point, that human-centric marketing is the best storytelling. If you want further proof of that, look at the creative campaigns that the leading AI companies are putting out right now. They are campaigns that are created by humans. They are about humans, and they are about storytelling. And I think that should tell you something about, that where they're coming from. They're not using their own tools to create those marketing campaigns. So I think that that's a really important detail to remind your listeners and anybody who might come across Bigmouth. Okay, now remind me again what the question was.
No, I think that's a powerful piece there, right? Because sometimes we have to remember that even people who create these tools don't use their own tools they don't use their tools 100% of the time, right? They use their tools when it's appropriate to do so. And I think that's what we as a society need to remember as well, is that all of these tools can be good if they're used when they're meant to be used and not all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah. But the original question was, I'd love to hear, because you talked about how you've had these spaces to lean into your own authenticity. I would love for you to tell us a story about yourself leaning into authenticity, if you feel free to share.
Yeah. So I've started creating my own series on videos on LinkedIn that I've called Mouthing Off, as kind of a play on Bigmouth, where I just take 2 minutes to create these videos to talk about things that uh, are important to me in the business, or things that are going on, or that I'm hearing from other people in conversations I'm having in networking events or with clients, or that kind of thing. And it's freshly off the ground. I think at this point I've created maybe 8 or 9 videos. And uh, early on in that process, there was a lot of hand wringing about what was the format of these videos going to be, what were the topics, how was I going to present myself in these videos. And I had to kind of take a step back and say, remember, you embrace failure as an iterative process towards innovation. So you can't step into this trying to be perfect to begin with. So what does that look like for myself in creating these videos? And I said, okay, why don't we just start, recording, like just hit the record button and see what happens. And not to say that the first video was bad by any means. I'm a creative at heart, so I knew I was going to have fun with them. But
Right.
I certainly said to myself, okay, we're just going to have fun with these. If people react to them, great. Over time, I'll start to refine things and polish different areas. And one of the things that in particular I've had a little bit of fun with, that I wasn't prepared to have so much fun with, is taking on sort of multiple personalities in those conversations. So, I think a lot of influencers you see sort of do those video styles where they're kind of talking back and forth with each other. And I think that kind of inspired me early on. And then I've started to have fun with that over the course of creating these videos. And I don't think I realized how much fun I would have with that I think there's a part of me deep inside that maybe in another life was a comedian, or maybe would have explored stand up or improv or something, because the video I put out the other day, you sit and you edit these videos and you have to listen to yourself for, 30, 45 minutes for a 2-minute video while you're editing these different clips. The one I put out the other day, I just did sort of a couple different, personality things, and I was just cracking up laughing at myself for 45 minutes. So, I think that's definitely a way I've leaned into my authentic self, is having fun with those videos, and allowing myself, in a time when it's hard to find joy in new spaces, to have a little bit of fun with it.
I love that. And moving right into that, if you want to check out that video that made Jonathan crack up at himself, because I'm sure going to go try and find it right now. Your LinkedIn is Jonathan D. Hart, correct?
Correct.
Perfect. So, Jonathan, thank you so much for an open, heartfelt, vulnerable conversation. You've given us so much to think about, especially around how authenticity and storytelling and marketing and brand really kind of feed into every layer of ourselves, our business, and who we are as people. For everyone listening, you can connect with Jonathan and learn more about his work at bigmouthcreative.com. Or as we shared, you can connect with him on LinkedIn. Don't forget to catch out those videos. And before we close, Jonathan, I have one final question.
Hit me.
One sentence, one word, one thing that you want every listener to remember as a result of listening to this conversation.
Vulnerability. That is my word that I espouse in any conversation that I can possibly have about it. I'm a big follower of Brene Brown, but I think vulnerability and empathy are the two most important things, and vulnerability is probably the most important thing right now to combat um, uh, bigotry and hate and all of the things that we're dealing with in a divisive world right now. I think vulnerability is what connects us at the deepest, most human level, and it's what builds community and builds joy and protects us from shame and guilt and all those things that we talked about.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Jonathan. And thank you all for tuning in to Amplifying Authenticity. If today's conversation sparks something for you, share it with a colleague or friend who's ready to lead with more courage and compassion. I'm Megan Fucciarelli, and until next time, keep leading with heart, purpose, and authenticity.